Hey friends, Kathryn here from Research Rockstar. Thanks for joining me here today. Today I'd like to talk about the impact of time on data quality in market research surveys, specifically the time that people take when they're responding to your surveys. So you've sent out a bunch of invitations, people are coming and taking your online questionnaire. That's fantastic. But how long are they actually spending on your questionnaire? And is it enough time? Is it enough time so that you can feel confident that they have actually read your questions, understood your instructions, and given some thought to their answers? So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, if you haven't looked at this information before, it's really easy in any online survey platform to see whether or not you have speeders. That is, people who are completing your questionnaire in unreasonably short amounts of time. For example, if I've just done a questionnaire where I know that the average respondent should be taking at least 10 minutes, and I have some people who are completing it in 2 minutes, I would consider those people speeders. So here's a sample of an output from a survey that I did where I'm just showing you how I exported it. So this is now the data just in Excel, and you can see that I have from the survey platform the start date and timestamp and the end date and timestamp. And I've called out a few examples. So I had this one questionnaire, and some people were completing my questionnaire in 11 minutes, some people were completing it in 6 minutes, and some people were completing it in over 30 minutes. So there's a lot of variability there, right? That's a huge amount of variability. So what's going on there? Well, some of these people who are doing it in 6 minutes may be speeders. They may be people who really just completed my questionnaire in an unreasonably short amount of time. However, before I conclude that, I need to think about my questionnaire design, because it's possible that some people only answered a subset of the questions. So if they were skipped or branched so that they didn't answer every question in the questionnaire, it could be legitimate that a subset of my respondents actually completed the questionnaire in a much shorter amount of time. For example, if I've done a survey of electric car owners, maybe I want to have anybody who's owned an electric car for less than 30 days to skip over an entire set of questions that might have to do with driving experiences. Maybe I didn't want to collect a lot of detail on driving experiences from people who hadn't had their driving experience for that long with that specific car. Maybe I only want to collect driving experiences from people who've owned their electric car for more than 30 days. Well, that could have been a big chunk of my questionnaire. So just because some people are completing my questionnaire in a lot less time doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But if those kinds of situations didn't exist, if there's no big branches that people are getting skipped over, if everybody's basically answering the same questions, and I'm seeing this much variability, that's a red flag. So it's important to kind of think logically, what questions were in your questionnaire, how long do you think it should be taking people, and are you seeing a lot of variability here? So again, all of the major online survey platforms make it really easy for you to get this information. If you've not looked for this information in the past, I encourage you to do so that you can have that peace of mind that people are spending enough time. Now, of course, there are also some people who take a long time. That is, they take much longer than you expect. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It could also mean that they're enjoying a nice cup of tea while they're taking your questionnaire, right? So they might just be people who are taking their time. Other people are very fast readers. So we're always going to have some variability in how much time people spend, but my concern is always to look for my speeders. It's one of the first things I do when I've come out of the field, I've completed data collection, and I'm starting to clean my data. I look through, and one of the first things I do is look for my speeders. If I do have speeders, and I'm sure that they're legitimate speeders, I will absolutely delete them from my data set. So I will remove those records from my data set if I have speeders. And if you're purchasing panel or sample from a panel company, then the process you want is to share those IDs with your panel supplier, and most panel suppliers will happily replace that respondent for you, of course, for no additional charge. Now, here's the thing. You want to start keeping an eye on what percent of your respondents you are removing for that purpose. If I'm working with a new panel provider, for example, and I'm seeing that 20% of my respondents are speeders, I'm not going to feel too good about that specific panel provider, right? So It's great that they're going to try to keep me happy by replacing those people, but if routinely I'm seeing a large percent of people who are speeders from that specific panel, I might think about trying out some other panels for that target population in the future. So I am concerned about speeders, but they're super easy to find. Just make sure that they're legitimate speeders and either delete them or replace them. Now, I'm also especially concerned about speeders if I am doing a questionnaire that has any sort of cognitively difficult content. So if I've got, say, constant sum questions or rank order questions, and I'm seeing people complete the survey really fast, that might be a concern. It's also especially a concern if I'm doing any sort of trade-off analysis. If I've got a questionnaire where I'm doing something like a discrete choice exercise or a max diff exercise, I really want people to be thinking when they're taking those exercises, right? That's not a gut question. If I'm just saying to somebody, hey, which of the following brands of yogurt are you familiar with? And it's a check all that apply. I want their gut, right? I just want them to check all that apply. I don't want them spending a lot of time. I want the top of mind responses. But if I'm doing a discrete choice or a max diff exercise, I want people thinking, right? I'm trying to get people to make trade-offs between different feature attributes or price levels or brands. So in those cases, I am especially concerned about people who may be completing the questionnaire much more quickly than they should. And I also want to share this really interesting piece of data that SurveyMonkey had published not too long ago, where they actually did research about the impact of questionnaire duration on the amount of time people spend on the questions. And what they found is that, not surprisingly, but delightfully quantified here, there is a relationship between survey length and the amount of time people spend per question. So what I'm showing here is that if you've got a longer questionnaire, then people are spending less time per question. That does raise another data quality concern. So we know these days that it's important to keep our questionnaires short. The really hot topic for that has to do with the fact that most of us, especially those of us who are doing consumer research, a lot of our survey respondents are taking the surveys from a mobile device, very often from a phone. And we know there's been a lot of research on research that shows that when people are taking these surveys on a phone, they don't like to spend more than 5 to 7 minutes or so. We tend to see people starting to drop out after that if they're on a mobile phone. And so we know that survey duration is really important, but here we really see that people aren't spending as much effort on longer surveys. So there are very few professional surveys I see with 1 or 2 questions, so I'm going to just skip to the middle of this particular table. So if I've got a questionnaire that has, say, 11 to 15 questions, people are spending on average 25 seconds per question. That's what SurveyMonkey concluded. That is pretty interesting to me. So I'm getting 25 seconds a question. But once I start approaching 30 questions, it's dropped down to 19 seconds. Now, I know you might be saying that doesn't seem like a lot, but it's clearly a directional piece of information for me here. That is, I'm seeing a directional relationship between the amount of questions I have and the amount of time people spend. So the next time you have a client or a colleague who's pushing you to create a 50-question questionnaire and they're really pushing you, this is another data point. Not only is that 50-question questionnaire going to be problematic if you are doing consumer research, because so many consumers take surveys on their smartphones these days, but in any kind of questionnaire we have to be concerned because the longer the question, the less amount of time they're spending per question. And I have to start getting concerned about that, especially if I am doing any kind of work where I really do want them to think carefully about the question and the answer options. So I hope that was a useful conversation. Let's just be careful that we always do check for speeders, make sure that they are legitimate speeders. Don't let them dirty up your data set. Get rid of them. Replace them if you can. And especially if you are doing a survey where you have any cognitively difficult content like some sort of trade-off exercise, then you really need to be vigilant about whether or not you've got speeders. Are people spending as much time as they really should be in order to be doing that sort of trade-off exercise? And for those of you who are interested in survey research, I just want to let you know that one of the things that I personally teach here at Research Rockstar is I personally teach the course on writing quantitative research reports. I love teaching this class because we are always in this position in our profession where we have data coming out and we have often a very short amount of time to create a report, yet that report really has to be great. Our clients, our colleagues want us to have reports that don't just report factual data. They're looking for us to synthesize the data to help them understand what the data actually implies. What does this data mean for this specific project's objectives? How can this research help my organization make money or save money? Or how can this really truly inform a product roadmap? Whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish in any given project. And so in the Writing Quantitative Research Reports class, we spend a fair amount of time on how we really tease out those key points, those key findings, those real ahas, so that we can take the data and not just report the data, but synthesize it in a way that we can get it to very precise and concise key findings that will inspire insights. This class is taught 3 times a year. We have one date coming up very shortly here in February, but again, it's taught 3 times a year. The course is taught live in the virtual classroom, or you can take it on demand by watching the course recordings and then completing the online assignments and the final assessment in our training portal. If you have any questions, please do let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day. Thanks, everyone.